the other day. Said there was a few things that he'd like to say. Stood right there and he looked me in the eye and he said, I got something that you might buy. He told me about a hole that was 6 feet deep, guaranteed to comfort my permanent sleep. $5 down, $5 a week for a 6-foot hole, that's mighty cheap. But I ain't ready to go. I ain't ready to go. I ain't ready to go. It is one of those things I try to do slow.
I'm fairly confident with starting this video by saying that the name Jim Sullivan probably means nothing to a lot, if not all of you. That's okay. I found Jim on accident, to be honest. I was just trying to see if San Diego had ever produced anybody cooler than Nick Cannon or Phil Mickelson. I know Tony Hawk. I didn't forget about Tony Hawk. We all know Tony Hawk. Fun fact about me is I'm usually drawn to the artists from 60s and the 70s who only had 1 or 2 albums and never saw a single fucking dollar from them. You know, I don't know. The music itself just kind of feels less noisy, less commercial. They have no idea what the concept of streams and monthly listeners are. They're just doing it because they want to. But that's exactly how I felt about Jim and his music. He was a simple man who seemed like he was making music and telling stories just because he couldn't not do it. Jim grew up in Nebraska, but his family moved to San Diego during World War II. The 6'2" quarterback of his high school football team dated and eventually ended up marrying the homecoming queen, aka his wife Barbara. Right after high school, he joined the band called the Survivors and got extremely invested into the guitar. Barbara later got a job at Capitol Records, which forced them to move to LA. But obviously I didn't force Jim to reconsider music. In a New York Times article about Jim, there's a quote from his own son that reads, "The idea that he might have to be a square and go work for someone else was probably as repulsive to him as cutting off his hand." Yeah. Through the late 60s, Jim was a regular performer at a beach bar in Malibu called The Raft, with frequent attendees like Harry Dean Stanton and Dennis Hopper enjoying Jim's music. Hopper even got him a small, uncredited cameo in the classic movie Easy Rider. To put it in perspective how sick that is, Jim was in one of the most important movies ever made before he ever released a single studio album. He was being hailed as the next Bob Dylan. Now you might be thinking, his wife works at one of the biggest record companies ever still, like to this day. That's gotta help out, right? No. Barbara's boss at Capitol Records at the time, John Rankin, is quoted as trying unsuccessfully to get label executives to sign Jim, saying that they just weren't interested at the time. However, someone did have the means to support Jim's dreams of recording an album, and his name was Al Dobbs, who was once an actor, but at the time when Jim met him, he was mostly just a cue card holder. He had this belief that, well, most people were out there searching for what was inside of them. Jim was trying to get out what was inside of him. In 1969, Dobbs was able to put some money together and co-found a small label called Monty. But most notably, he supplied Jim with instrumental backup in the form of the famed recording band, The Wrecking Crew.
We came in the studios with Levi's and t-shirts, smoking cigarettes. The older guys were saying they're going to wreck the music business.
Well, The Wrecking Crew is a nickname that was given to the studio musicians in the 1960s in Los Angeles.
Jim and The Wrecking Crew recorded 10 tracks, all under the album name of UFO. So the album sounds beautiful, haunting, cosmic, weird, strange, all at the same time. The lyrics in each and every song are soft, they're melancholic, generally just brutally honest. Fun fact too, the term UFO itself wasn't officially recognized by the US government until 1952, and the moon landing was the same year as the album release, so Jim was pretty early on to this cultural phenomenon of UFOs and extraterrestrial life that we're still pretty invested into right now. Spending most of their money to actually form the label, Dobbs and its other founders were unable to put any money towards promoting the album, and it sadly saw little to no sales. Unfazed, Jim released a second album titled Jim Sullivan in 1970, this time under a new record label which happened to be none other than Playboy Records, which, yes, that Playboy. Now you might be thinking, a big brand name, second album, here we go, Billboard charts, right? No. Record stores has no idea what to do with anything that had a Playboy logo on it. They didn't know how to sell that. And internally, the label's marketing itself was just terrible. They weren't focused on music at the time, clearly. But zooming out from that whole angle, whereas UFO was more of a storytelling journey, going from the desert to the stars, this second album was a lot more inward. It's full of songs that Jim recorded alone in a hotel room with nothing but a guitar and a typewriter. But from being alone while writing an album to being alone somewhere in the middle of the desert, this would be the last time we truly ever heard or saw Jim. This story's pretty important to me. Guy means a lot to me. I can't really explain why, but he just does. I feel like to explain the final days until his disappearance, I'm going to do it this way, kind of guide you. Let's just start off with the plain, basic facts of it all. Okay, so fact 1. On March 4th, 1975, Jim left LA heading for Nashville, hoping to better his music career. Okay, fact 2. While on the road, he makes a call to his wife from a payphone and explains how he saw something incredible and something strange, but won't go into any more detail over the phone, and he'd call her when he gets to Nashville. This is the last time that Barbara ever hears from Jim. Fact 3. March 5th, 1975, Jim got pulled over on a suspected DUI. The cops do let him go as he passes all the tests, but they recommend that he goes and stops at a motel for a little bit. Fact 4. Jim does check into a motel in Santa Rosa, New Mexico, but before the day's even over, he's gone and his room is left completely untouched. Fact 5. In his short time at the motel, Jim does buy 1 bottle of vodka. Fact 5 and Fact 4 come from the motel clerk. This is what he told police. He was actually the last person to see Jim. Fact 6. March 8th, 1975, Jim's VW Beetle is found 24 miles from the motel near the Giannetti family ranch. There's no footprints, no fingerprints, nothing at all reported, even to this day. Fact 7. He left everything in the car. ID, money, clothes, other copies of his records. Most importantly, though, he left his guitar. So, Fact 8. Days after disappearing, Barbara Sullivan's sister was on the phone with the police, where one officer said to her, Jim wasn't in jail, but if it were up to him, it's where he belonged. Fact number 9. About a month later, a decomposed body matching the general height and weight of Jim was discovered in the same general search area where Jim disappeared, but it's never been identified. Fact number 10. Jim's manager at the time, Robert Ginter, is on record as saying that the two had a conversation discussing how they would disappear if need be, and Jim's answer to that was he would walk right into the desert and disappear. Now let's talk theories. Theory number 1, aliens. Jim's very first album, again titled UFO, contains a bunch of lyrics full of open highways, shimmering lights, unusual encounters. You can find a lyric on any song on that album and make it relate to extraterrestrial, supernatural, whatever you want. But then again, there's that last phone call to his wife of all people, where he describes something strange, something incredible, but doesn't want to talk about it. It's like he can't talk about it. Barbara Sullivan chose to believe this theory over any of the other 3 I'm going to present to you. So I can't blame her either. I imagine that the aliens appreciated Jim's music more than any of us did down here. Maybe the aliens just were like, let's get a sweet 2-for-1 deal here. We get good vibes and great music. Right? Okay, theory 2, the mob. Some people do point out that Jim's car being found on the Giannetti family ranch is a little more than coincidence. Many other articles that you'll find online speculate about this family. May have had organized crime ties, possibly moved to Hawaii less than a week or 2 after Jim's disappearance. Hawaii from New Mexico. It's like neighbors, right? Barbara Sullivan has admitted she could never fully shake this theory. Maybe Jim ran into the wrong person, saw something he shouldn't have, got way over his head. I don't know, all the mafia cliches. It's a darker theory to stick to. It is the 70s. Theory 3, cops. Good old piggies, possibly just back up to their usual business. I mean, let's go off the cold hard facts that we have. DUI test happens. Jim's recommended to stay at the motel. Days later, Jim disappears. Then there's the officer confidently saying over the phone to Jim's sister-in-law that Jim should be in jail. And a month later, a body very similar, the exact height and the exact weight. The record's on the internet. You can look it up. It matches what we have on record for Jim. In the same area that they should have been searching for, pops up a month later, and they go, we don't know who it is. It's convenient. That's all I'm saying. And then again, there's a lot of reports that the sheriff in this county retired a month after this. So right around the body's discovered, the sheriff says, you know what? It was a little fishy. Jim's own son, Chris Sullivan, has spoken at length at this theory, mentioning his father's rebellious mistrust towards authority and his counterculture attitude. Reading his son's words myself, it doesn't seem like he's straight up suggesting that the cops violently beat Jim to death or anything gruesome like that. Just maybe the cops weren't too fond of someone different than them, but not that it had anything to do with Jim specifically. Remember, it's the 70s. And the last theory, maybe he's just gone. Saddest of all of the theories, there is the quote from his manager, which was shortly before he left for Nashville, which unfortunately does line up with the reality of how Jim's disappearance looks. All we truly know is that Jim drove off alone into the desert, dreaming of making better music and a better life for him and his family, and then he was gone. No footprints, no fingerprints, not a single thing was ever recorded, like to this day. Maybe he's still out there. He'd be like 85, 86, I think. He could just be living in true solitude. What's really funny to me about all the theories in general is that they give Jim this big, grandiose, climactic ending, which is way bigger and cooler than anything he got when he was actually here and performing and doing this shit for real. All of them turn him into way more of like a true crime sort of mysterious figure rather than just a person. It is a strange story, as a man essentially just vanished. But maybe it's also not that strange. The aliens, the mob, the police, it's all part of an extremely entertaining story to tell, but also a story you're telling about a real man. Jim Sullivan was a man just trying, creating, calling out to something, never hearing, anything in return. Maybe if one more person had just checked in at the time. I just think he needed a reminder he wasn't invisible. Disappearing, whether in the 70s or now, doesn't just happen all at once in a big bang to me. Much quieter, I feel like. Gradual, slow fade away from everything, everyone you care about and you know and you love. And, all the intrigue in the world doesn't mean anything if we're ignoring the ones we love. Who cares about the story, especially all the what-ifs surrounding everything? Just care about the people around you.
You're just a youth seeking truth, that's a fact that I don't mind. So why do you weep on and sleep on my bed all the time?